Thank you very much for tuning in, and welcome to another edition of Easy But Not So Easy. Today, we're going to talk about the conversation with your parents about care for your parents. So let's take a moment here for a second. I want to set this up accordingly. You get to that point where you start to notice that something is different about the way your parents are moving. Now, if it's something traumatic, whether it be a car accident or a stroke or a heart attack, that's a little bit different, but it's the same conversation. Something happens where they had a major health scare or just a slow progression of noticing that your parents are just not moving in the way that they normally are. And so as a result, you are now facing the reality that the people or the persons who have raised you, shaped you, and guided you through your life are now kind of moving in a different manner. You're noticing things that typically would not have been brought to your attention before. You're watching things that you're noticing that they're missing appointments, that they are missing the ability to get things. They're not necessarily moving at a speed and a manner that's consistent with what you're used to. You're paying close attention to this. And here's the hard part. You're trying your best to give it a pass. You don't realize that's what you're doing, but that's exactly what you're doing. You've convinced yourself that it is in your best interest, or you believe in their best interest, to give them as much time to be independent as possible. And so, of course, being the child, you don't want to step in the forefront and basically start trying to bulldoze because you don't want to push against your parents. Because again, these are your parents. But the reality is that you realize you need to prepare yourself and your parents because they are transitioning to a point where you need to have the conversation about, okay, what does our parents' new normal look like? And so most times when you start having those feelings, you've probably had those feelings for a while. It could be a few months, it could be a few years. So when you know you're at that point, you've already made that determination that, hey, yeah, we're there. So now it's time to have the conversation. Which brings me to my 2 points of, what's easy and not so easy about each part of this. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to first talk about the easy part. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the easy part about having the conversation with your parents about caring for your parents. First of all, you already know what the needs that need to be addressed. I mean, if you start noticing that your parents are not as quick when they're driving, if you notice that they're having difficulty getting up and down through various portions of their home, if you notice that they are having problems remembering when to take their medication or when they're having their doctor's appointments, you already have recognized these things that need to be addressed. So having that initial conversation, you've already have a reference point of things in your mind that you know you need to go over. So that is the easy part. You also have access to your parents' medical and financial records. The nice part is that probably as you've gotten older, your parents hopefully have kind of had conversations with you about where they bank. They probably have been banking at the same place for years. There's probably various institutions that they deal with that they're used to dealing with that you know about already. So those things are fairly straightforward. So you know about the needs. You already know about where the resources are. And if you are an only child, it's easy. I'm an only child, so I know where that's coming from. But if you have siblings, you and your siblings are probably on the same sheet of music. And the reason why I say that is unless you and your siblings don't get along, you're probably observing the same things. Like your brothers and your sisters, you're all noticing these exact same issues. So once you have all these things in place, having the conversation is not as cray because you're on the same sheet of music. You have access to the information that you need. And you know the problem areas that you need to address. So that is the easy part. Now let's take a moment to focus on the not so easy part. So now let's take a moment to have a discussion about the not so easy part of speaking to your parents about caring for your parents. First, and this is probably the toughest one, your parents may not want to have the conversation. Let's just be clear. You know your mom and dad. They've made it very clear through the lifetime of them raising you what they will and will not talk about. And you know when they ain't trying to hear what you got to say. And there's nothing cool about being in a situation where you know you have to have this conversation and your parents are really giving you the gas face. And that's for my old heads, you know what I mean. And for the young people, like gas face, your parents are giving you that look like, I'm not even trying to hear nothing that you have to say. More importantly, they shut down. And so that conversation becomes more difficult because they literally are not engaging you at all. They have literally just kind of tuned you out in your entirety. The other thing is your parents may be withholding information, meaning you may not even realize, but maybe their financial situation is a lot worse than you thought. Maybe their health situation is a lot worse than you thought. Maybe the medical information is a lot more detailed than you realize. The simple fact of the matter is they're grown adults. They move independently. They're under no obligation to tell you or share with you anything. So the fact that you're now finding out all this new things makes the conversation more difficult because now you have to pivot and start focusing on what are these other things that they talked about that they haven't told me. Yeah, the conversations take a whole different turn when you know you're moving into this realm where when you come for your initial conversation and you were aware of all these things, now you got to have a new conversation because they've now told you or you found out stuff that they didn't tell you about before. And then finally, the biggest thing, your parents are still your parents. And so what does that mean? Well, your parents are going to look at you not as an adult who is their equal. In some instances, they may not even look at you as an adult. They're going to look at you as the one who they wiped your behind when you were a baby. They taught you how to walk. They took you to all of your dance rehearsals and tennis practices and so forth. So all of this noise of you talking to them may fall on deaf ears because at their core, they're going to still look at you as the child. So as a result, the conversation takes on a whole different vibe. So therefore, having that conversation becomes harder because you have these things that are resistant. Which brings me to my final point of our discussion today, just for your benefit whatsoever, so that you're aware of this. It's going to happen. Whether you want to or not, you're going to have the conversation. And it's not something that you have to face, right away, but it's something that you're going to have to face when you start noticing that you need to have it sooner than later. Start preparing yourself. Now, preparing your parents may be a little more difficult. You might want to start dropping hints. You may want to start increasing your presence, or you just might want to just rip the bandage off and just go straight in. But the reality is that you need to let your parents know that the conversation about what's going to happen going forward is going to happen whether they want to have it or not. Because in order for you and your siblings to be able to be there for them and help them maintain their independence as much as possible, you need to know what's going on. And let me be clear when I say this. I know this is my show of easy but not so easy. Having this conversation is not easy. But it is a conversation you're going to have. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Easy but Not So Easy. As always, you can hit me up on any of my social media platforms or just type in AnthonyReeves.com and you can find me all over the place. As I end this show with my favorite question of the day, are you ready for the Anthony Reeves experience?